Well, hello, and welcome to the CSF Monthly Podcast for October. We know it's October because I've got my first Scottish winter cold, and that means it's a kind of unusual, husky podcast, but I hope you'll enjoy it nonetheless. And this month I'm going to be reviewing two new papers that we've uploaded to the CSF website. The detailed slide sets for these can be found on the website. And the first paper I want to talk about looks at the effect of baricitinib and adalimumab in reducing pain and improving function in people with rheumatoid arthritis who have a low disease activity. Now, first thing to note, it's a post-hoc analysis. First author here is Bruno Fautrel from Sorbonne Université in Paris and colleagues, and it's looking at data primarily derived from RA-BEAM. So what's the background you need to have in your mind? Well, first of all, clinical remission and or low disease activity are targets for every patient with rheumatoid arthritis as part of our treat to target strategy. And the overall aim of that is to reduce inflammation, prevent joint damage, limit loss of physical disability over time. We have noticed, however, that improvements in inflammation do not always correlate with some of these less objective targets, particularly with PROs, patient-reported outcomes. And there are those who believe that these PROs better reflect impact of the disease on a patient's day-to-day quality of life. Now, a quick reminder, the RA-BEAM study included 1,305 adults with active rheumatoid and an inadequate prior response to methotrexate, and they received baricitinib 4 milligrams, adalimumab 40 milligrams, or placebo on a background of methotrexate therapy. The pain was assessed throughout the study using a visual analog scale, and physical function was assessed using the HAQ Disability Index. Additional PROs assessed at baseline week 24 included fatigue, work absenteeism and presenteeism, productivity loss, and activity impairment. Again, post-hoc analysis compared improvements in pain, physical function in patients with otherwise well-controlled rheumatoid after 24 weeks treatment with baricitinib, adalimumab, and placebo. Now, 1,010 patients were categorized into three groups depending on their remission state. Patients in remission or with LDA, patients who had not achieved a remission. And the key results from this study, well, for patients in remission at week 24, change from baseline in mean pain VAS score with baricitinib was significantly greater than that with placebo and also greater than that achieved with adalimumab. Now, also for patients not in remission or LDA, the change in mean pain VAS score was also significantly greater with baricitinib and adalimumab than with placebo. Perhaps not a major surprise there. Now, whether patients were in remission or not, there was no significant difference between baricitinib and adalimumab. The proportions of patients in remission or LDA with minimal or no pain and with normalized physical function were also found to be numerically greater with baricitinib than placebo. The fatigue data, well, they showed that despite meeting DAS28 ESR criteria for remission or LDA, many patients continue to experience fatigue, although the scores were fairly low in all treatment groups. Productivity of working patients generally improved in all treatment groups, including those who were not in remission or LDA. Well, what do we make of all of this? Well, I think control of pain and maintenance of physical function remains a priority for people with rheumatoid, and these data inform that as an objective. We should be considering that achieving PROs are an important treatment goal for our patients. And in addition, this would supplement what we're doing when we're thinking about reducing inflammation, because overall health quality is our objective as the treating team. Overall, baricitinib 4 mg provided enhanced improvement in pain and physical function in patients with well-controlled rheumatoid, suggesting that it may have effects beyond immune modulation alone, although we need to look at that in much more detail and get far better comparisons with the adalimumab arms in larger studies, and we'll get that as time goes on. Now, the second paper I want to focus on examines the risk factors for major adverse cardiovascular events, MACE, seen in phase 3 and long-term extension studies of tofacitinib in people with rheumatoid arthritis. And the lead author here is a real expert in the field, Professor Christina Charles-Schoeman from University of California in USA. So what do you need to remember here? Well, I think everyone now is aware that cardiovascular disease is a common problem in people with rheumatoid, counts for about a third of deaths. And the risk of cardiovascular disease is increased in people with rheumatoid. There's a complex relationship with lipids. And we do know that lipids will vary on the basis of intercurrent inflammation. and that lipids in turn may therefore change as we administer an anti-inflammatory therapeutic. And for that reason, interpreting cardiovascular risk in the context of absolute lipid measures is really quite a challenge. So we know that when we looked at the pooled phase 3 data, tofacitinib treatment is associated with a 10 to 20% increase in lipid levels, and that may affect either impact on inflammation. Effectively, there's an inverse relationship. More inflammation, lower lipids. If you improve inflammation, lipids may rise, or it may reflect a true lipid-associated increase in vascular risk. These changes tend to normalize over about 12 weeks of treatment. Now, this is a post-hoc analysis of 6 oral and 2 long-term extension studies. It determined whether changes in lipid levels following tofacitinib treatment were associated with an increased risk of MACE. Now, the analysis population included 4,076 patients, representing almost 13,000 patient years of exposure to tofacitinib. Overall, 52 patients had an adjudicated MACE, and that's an occurrence rate of 0.4. Particularly, there were 12 cases of cardiovascular death, 19 cases of non-fatal MI, and 23 cases of non-fatal stroke. At baseline, increased risk of MACE was associated with older age, higher BMI, statin use, or longer duration of rheumatoid arthritis, but interestingly not with disease activity and inflammation measures. So that tends to reflect the area under the curve of being older, already needing a statin and the like. In contrast, steroid use was associated with a significantly lower risk. After 24 weeks of tofacitinib treatment, increases in HDL-C and decreases in the total cholesterol to HDL-C ratio were associated with reduced future MACE risk. Changes in total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and disease activity measures were not associated with reduced future MACE risk. Well, how do we interpret this? Well, the likelihood of MACE remains a major issue for us, and this is just one of many studies that I think you need to look at when you're making an overall evaluation. These data are consistent with previous large population studies of cardiovascular outcomes, and they do reinforce, first of all, that we need to look at traditional risk factors in people with rheumatoid. Secondly, we need to think very carefully about what the impact of an immune-modifying therapy upon measurable lipid levels really means in terms of future MACE risk. This study would suggest that the oral tofacitinib trials were not designed, were not suggesting future MACE risk, but remember, they weren't actually designed for that original purpose. That's why we need more data, larger data sets. Okay, so all of the content I've discussed this month is available for you to view at your convenience in a much more detailed slide format. The slides are great on the website. I really recommend them to you. I use them pretty widely, and they're a beautifully presented and definitive resource for you. They're available in the publication section at cytokinesignaling.com. And now don't forget to subscribe to our podcast either on our website or through SoundCloud, YouTube, or Apple Podcast. Let us know what you think by leaving us a review. We really are interested in your views. And meantime, thanks ever so much for listening.